Well, once again, thank you all for the invitation. I'm very thrilled to be here this afternoon to speak with you. As Carol said, I'm the new superintendent of Bandelier. Been here since August. Prior to Bandelier, I was the deputy superintendent at Independence National Historical Park in Philadelphia with the Liberty Bell and Independence Hall and 50 some odd other, 5 other national historic landmarks and about 50 other historic buildings, all related to the founding of the country and various other things that happened around Independence Hall over the 250 years since then, which is kind of amazing because really almost every major social event that happened in this country somehow finds its way with a nexus to Independence Hall and the Liberty Bell. So it was nice to see, history in progress. And I think Bandelier is also in that same vein. And so prior to that, I was the chief ranger at Independence for about 5 years, and then the deputy chief ranger at Glacier National Park for about 8 years before that, district ranger in Joshua Tree before that, and I believe Grand Canyon before that, and then a handful of parks along the way. So I've been, unfortunately, as the gray hairs show, I've been in the Park Service a long time. West. I am a native New Mexican, so I was born in Albuquerque and even went to school in Las Cruces, and then found my way into the Park Service. So it's really a wonderful thing to find my way back in New Mexico. It really does feel like a homecoming. And I'm certainly thrilled with the really warm welcome that the community of Los Alamos and the surrounding neighbors and the partners and our tribal partners have given me since I've arrived. So I thank you all for that. So let me see. Now, there we go. Yeah, unfortunately, our agency uses Teams, so Zoom is quite alien to me. So I'll apologize in advance that I'm probably going to mess this up numerous times over the course of this presentation, but hopefully we can recover. I always start just about every time I speak with anybody with our land acknowledgement statement. And as you can see, this is currently on our website. We'll probably be refining it a little bit here and there. I think it's kind of a new thing in the National Park Service, but I think it's very important that we, and I'll just read it as it is. At Bandelier, we serve as the proud stewards of what is the ancestral and traditional lands of at least 23 tribal nations, and that we recognize the long history this land has and the connections that the people of these nations have to it to this day. It's our honor to serve as the current stewards. We seek to ensure that we manage all aspects of the monument in a way that demonstrates respect and reverence for our tribal partners and their ancestors, with the understanding that their cultures, lifestyles, religious beliefs, and traditions continue to be shaped by their ties to the natural and cultural resources of the monument. I think it's important for us and important for us all to realize that the history of this area and the history of this part of New Mexico goes back much further than the 250 years I just mentioned that we were a country, and that there are certainly people who had great civilizations and long lives that predate the European colonization by thousands and thousands of years, and we want to acknowledge that this is the landscape that is so important to them. So some new things with my arrival here. I think I am the first superintendent of Bandelier that actually supervises the superintendent of the Valles Caldera. Y'all know the Valles Caldera had a little bit of a bumpy start coming into the National Park Service. It started with the trust. The trust, I think, ran for 5 or 6 years before the park transitioned over into the National Park Service. And certainly and those of you in the community, I'm not going to sugarcoat it. There's been definitely some bumps along the way in terms of getting what was once private land that moved into the public domain, and then has since then moved into the National Park Service, getting that resource up to the standards and kind of the expectations that people have of the National Park Service. It is truly, for those of you who've been in the area a long time, it's a phenomenal resource. It's a phenomenal geographic. It's phenomenally scenic. It's culturally important. It's really a wonderful addition to the National Park Service. And I believe after kind of letting the Valles struggle its way through its management plans and its various environmental assessments and everything, that the region and Washington felt like that it might be an advantage if the Valles Caldera was aligned with Bandelier. So, and certainly the task that I've been giving is to look and see where we can, share our resources across the two ecosystems. Because, in fact, we share a border with the Valles Caldera and Bandelier, and so our ecosystems, even though they are ecologically very, very different, they are definitely one. One runs into the other one, and a management action in Bandelier can have an impact on the Valles Caldera and vice versa. So the goal of this was management across the ecosystem, certainly to improve our coordination with the stakeholders. And certainly I've heard many times that our Pueblo partners are often scratching their heads about why some action of the National Park Service is planning on we reach out and we do our consultation with them, and then another national park unit reaches out to them for the exact same reason to do the same consultation. And I think that I've heard that the tribes find that annoying, and I guess I don't blame them. I also want to say we started out, well, I want to say, like I said, I got here in August, and I believe in September, I learned that we had an opportunity to engage in a strategic planning effort. It just so happened that the Valles Caldera had initiated some strategic planning pre-plans right prior to my arrival, and so had Salinas Mission. So the opportunity came up for us to join in with that planning meeting, or that whole strategic planning effort. It's obviously not ideal, and it certainly wouldn't have been my first choice to land in a park and then 2 months later start strategic planning. But I definitely sense that there was a very, very good opportunity for us here. Having a strategic plan process right at the beginning of a new superintendent's tenure in a park really allows the community and the stakeholders and our Pueblo partners and even our employees to come together and articulate what a shared vision would be over the next 5 years, and allow that shared vision to suggest to me what our goals and priorities are. So I'm hoping that when we get to the end of this strategic planning process, we're going to have a really well honed out vision of what the next 5 years at Bandelier will look like. And stemming from that will be, our goals and priorities, and even our work tasks are. And my hope is that this will be something that will not only allow us to share a common vision with all of our neighbors and our partners, but also, allow all our neighbors' apartment to hold me accountable if I stray from that. So given all that, even though the workload wasn't a welcome addition the first few months, I feel like the opportunities outweighed that. And so we have both feet. So I think I mentioned earlier, we kicked off our planning effort in November of 2021. We started our stakeholder engagement right off the bat. Some of you may have, if you're affiliated. I don't believe we sent anything directly to your organization, but certainly I'm sure there's some crossover with the Chamber of Commerce and the Friends of Bandelier between this groups and others. So some of you may have had an opportunity to weigh in on our initial stakeholder engagement. We just finished our midpoint. So our midpoint, initially we identified what our core values were and things that made us kind of unique as a park. We identified what the threats were, and then we went back out with a presentation to our partners and stakeholders just at the end of January to get some feedback again from the community to see if we were on the right track, if we had identified the threats and we had identified the things about Bandelier that were important to our partners. So we just completed that process, and we are now jumping into our visioning section. And hopefully that this is kind of where the real meat of the strategic planning comes from, is when we can land on a vision, we can test that vision and that vision statement with their communities and our stakeholders, and then ultimately work that into what our actual strategic plan will be, which will guide the work for the next 5 years. Our hope is, and I think we're on track for this, is that we should have that plan ready to distribute mid to late April of this year. So please, you can send me a side note or a sidebar if you'd like to see a copy of that plan, or if you'd like an opportunity to be involved in that last. We will have one more community reach out where we will once again just gut check when we kind of get to the draft of our final plan on whether or not we're on the right track. Because once again, it's very important to us that this is a plan that's shared by not only the park, but by the community, and that we're all on the same page, and that we all share as much as we can in today's society, that we share a common vision about where we want this to go. So what's been happening at the park? So October, as I show here, I did not, unfortunately, I apologize, I didn't update this slide since last December. So the numbers here reflect where we were in October. But I just saw our year-end visitation from 2021, and sure enough, 2021 was a record year for Bandelier. We have never had the visitation that we've had in 2021. And as you can see, October with 34,000 people, that was the busiest single month in Bandelier's recorded history. So, and unfortunately, I don't have what our final year-to-date total was, but I think it was in that 250,000 arena, which I believe 2019 was a record year for us as well. But I believe in 2021, we did actually break our all-time annual visitation record. Our campground stays were also sky high. So I mean, it's kind of, this is a real challenge for the park, because as I said there at the bottom of the slide, I don't really have any information to say about why this is. This isn't unique to Bandelier. I would say most of the Western parks, and I can say a pretty good chunk of the Eastern parks, had similar spikes in visitation. So, we've theorized that COVID, certainly drove those communal spaces out of our collective consciousness. And so the reaction of the country, was it to go to the great outdoors and explore outdoor spaces? That seems to be in play. So whether that is a new normal, if COVID, recedes and we are no longer in a pandemic, but we're more in an endemic kind of thing, does our visitation go away? Or did COVID re-engage the country with the national parks and the great outdoors? And this is just going to be something that we will have to contend with from here on out. I think it's kind of too early to tell. We are certainly doing everything we can, and it's certainly part of our strategic plan to think about visitor use strategies and what might we do in the event that we keep hitting these kind of numbers and these kind of capacities. It is a little heartbreaking to me. There are several times through August and September and even into October, and I think even in a few times in November, where we hit our capacity, and we unfortunately had to turn visitors away at the entrance station because we just had no place to put them. And I think that's tragic. It's something that I would like to avoid, but when we hit capacity, there's not a lot of choice. So certainly something that we are looking into. And to that end, I can tell you where we are with the shuttle service. This last year, we operated it only on weekends. The shuttle service had significant challenges in the last year. Nonetheless, like staffing shortages, I think like any of you that are operating a business right now can attest that it is almost impossible to find people to work in your business. And I think that the shuttle operation had the same kind of issues. The COVID-19 restrictions, I really think about it, the bottom line was nobody wanted to get on the bus because, and I can totally understand that. If you're concerned about catching a potentially fatal virus, then probably the last thing you want to do is smash yourself like a sardine in close quarters with a whole bunch of other people from all over the country. So needless to say, even though we offered the bus service on a limited basis, this past year, it was not popular. So what does that mean for the future? We are intending this year to operate the shuttle service again, and the visitation numbers that I just talked about indicate that it's probably going to be pretty critical that we have some way to manage this spiking visitation without turning people away. So our intent is to once again run the shuttles in much the way we did prior to the COVID-19 pandemic. Some of these issues are still in play. I've heard that Los Alamos is still having difficulty hiring enough drivers to run their existing routes, and so having them hire enough drivers to add on the shuttle into Bandelier is definitely going to be a challenge. We still don't know what people's comfort level is going to be when restrictions are lifted. Are they going to want to pack themselves into a bus to ride 15 or 20 minutes with their neighbors from all over the world? I think that remains to be seen. So we're intending to give this another run, but this may not really work out as a long-term solution. So we're trying to prepare for that as well. But we are hopeful, and we're very, very grateful for the city of Los Alamos for their partnership with this. It's really been a really outstanding partnership. I guess we'll have to see if it's really something that's still workable, into the future with the changes in society that have happened. So programming, we're actively engaged in updating and overhauling all of our internal programming and interpretive messages. We've already engaged, I want to say 3 of our affiliated tribes to look into how we can get more on-site traditional Pueblo members to help us, interpret the sites that are so important to them. We're looking at the Pueblo Loop interpretive media and how we can update that. And interestingly enough, if change is something that I don't know that we've talked about a whole lot in Bandelier, but I would say it's an interesting thing, because even though I know a lot of us lived through these 2 really horrible fires that went through in the last 20 years that really devastated the landscape, if there was a nugget of good things that came out of that, which there weren't many, but Bandelier just happened to have a very, very advanced natural resource and science program prior to any of these fires. So just serendipitously, we had plots, landscape plots and vegetation plots all over the park, way up into the high elevations. And we had a really good partnership with the USGS. And so we have a lot of data that predates the fires. Then when the fires went through, we were able to go back and revisit those plots and engage more and more in the science of this kind of thing. So we actually have Bandelier has probably one of the most definitively defensible sets of data anywhere in the country that can really in a very specific way demonstrate climate change over 20 years. So Bandelier is in that 20 years since I was a kid, and I, like every other kid in New Mexico, every time I had a relative visiting from wherever and they dropped into Albuquerque, well, we were in the car up to Bandelier. So I certainly spent a lot of time as a kid in Bandelier, and it has definitely changed. I think we have an opportunity to speak about climate change in a way that maybe a lot of other areas don't, and to make it tangible. Because I certainly think we've actually had entire ecosystem transitions, and our scientists are telling you that they are not going to come back. Some of these large stand Douglas fir and ponderosa pine communities, well, they're now grasslands, and that's probably what they are going to be from forever. So I think we have this opportunity to I know when I was younger, certainly we talked about climate change as this kind of esoteric thing that was happening out there that was going to affect our children and our grandchildren. Well, no, we've actually had entire climate zones, and we've had climate transition in just my lifetime. And to me, that's a bit terrifying. And I think that's something that we're hoping that we can leverage just with our very, very solid scientific database that we have. Yeah. So little grim there, but like I said, maybe an opportunity. And I say we still have very engaged partners. I like to highlight our partnership with Peak. We do co-programming with them quite frequently, and our hope is that we're going to continue that partnership into the future. So just some other physical things happening around the park right now. We are in the middle of the Aguila Road infrastructure update project. So that if you've been in the park anytime since, I want to say we kicked this off in September. So Aguila Road is completely torn up right now because we are replacing all of the utility systems. We're improving the drainages, restoring the RV pads that used to be back there, and we're rehabilitating the historic CCC stable to convert it into office space, because we are unfortunately very, very short on office space, and it's kind of unlikely that we're going to have a stock program anymore. So this project is currently, if you drive into the park right now, we have flagmen on the main park road, kind of on the middle of the hill. I anticipate it's going to, limited traffic interruptions, probably all the way through April of 2020. And we anticipate that project to be completed in April of 2022. Also, some of you may have heard we were very, very lucky when the Great American Outdoors Act was passed. That was a huge infrastructure finance boost that came from Congress, I'm going to say about a year and a half ago. Bandelier is one of the very few smaller parks that actually had a project that fit into that Goya umbrella. And so we competed for and we got about $34 million to upgrade all of the infrastructure that runs into the main part of the park. So, and you can see this picture here, that's probably about the last time anybody worked on any infrastructure in the park at all. That's obviously from the CCC. So we are intending to replace all water, gas, sewer, electric, and internet. So we're actually well down the road on the design part of that project. We actually think that we are going to have that project in front of the Park Service's Infrastructure Review Board, maybe as early as April too. Boy, April's sounding busy. The more I say this out loud, the less I want April to come around. But either way, I think we think we'll be presenting this in April of 2022 and with construction slated to begin in 2023. So it's a very exciting project. It's really long overdue, and it should really set Bandelier up for managing utility over the next 20 years. I think this will give us about 20 years of pretty reliable utility infrastructure. It is going to come at a cost probably in 2023. There is going to be extensive amount of constructions, and I think visitors should expect that there'll be flaggers and there'll be delays and there'll definitely be some visitor disruptions because it's a major project, and it's going to go essentially right down the middle of our main entrance road. So also this year, we are fixing and finishing all of the remaining roofs on the historic district, on the CCC historic district at the bottom of Frijoles Canyon. We've replaced some of the roofs already, but this year, I believe beginning once again in April, we'll be kicking off yet another contract that'll secure all of the roofing for the historic district. So once again, I don't anticipate a lot of visitor disruption from that project, but there may be areas where we have parts of the parking lot cordoned off, and there may be some buildings that have scaffolding up on them. So could be some impact, but I don't think that's really going to affect visitor access a whole lot. Also, right now, I'm sure if any of you have driven from White Rock into town or even back up into Los Alamos, you've seen the extensive amount of construction and utility replacement hanging at the junction of the main road into White Rock right at Sankowe. So that project right at Sankowe is a co-managed project between LANL and the Department of Transportation and the National Park Service. So what's happening now is the Department of Transportation and LANL they've got the road sides torn up, and they're replacing drainage and sewage and utility lines that run through that. The second part of that is they're going to be realigning the intersection to make it more traffic friendly, I guess, and a little less dangerous. And part of that is that we are going to be building a discrete lot off, for Sankowe. So that means, if you've hiked or walked around Sankowe lately, currently when you're backing out, you kind of have to hope that the light, depending on where you're parked, you kind of have to hope that the light is red, hold your breath, say a Hail Mary, and then run into traffic and hope that nobody creams you as you come out of that parking lot. So this realignment will actually make the entrance to our parking lot at the light. So the light will become a four-way stop. And so people visiting Sankowe will be able to go in and out of there with the assistance of a traffic light. So we're excited about that. I think that's going to do a lot for the safety of Sankowe. The unfortunate side of that is, and I think that this is also going to kick off, I'm not going to say April because I've already cursed April too badly. So let's say May. Let's hope maybe May that perhaps that part of the project will kick in. And unfortunately, I think that once that is under construction, we are not going to have a safe place for people to park to visit Sankowe. So for the community, I'm hoping to make sure everybody knows and is supportive of us having Sankowe closed for a period of time while we do the construction on that parking lot. I know San Alfonso is very happy about that. Sankowe has gotten very popular And the amount of use it's getting, there's been quite a bit of, and probably because of the ongoing drought as well, there's been quite a bit of degradation of some of the soils and some of the vegetation that even up around the cavates. So giving the opportunity for Sankowi to just rest without visitation for some period of time is very desirable. So for a lot of different reasons, and I hope that the community will support it, but I believe we are going to have to close Sankowi for probably a good chunk of the summer. And also coming up, we have, I believe, probably midsummer, we'll have a group of contractors up building a retaining and restoring a retaining wall at Alcove House to stabilize the, there's essentially Alcove House is another thing that's suffering from maybe too much love. A lot of visitors go up there. There's not a lot of moisture, and the more people what's really happening is that the soils are now getting very, very loose, and then the wind goes in there and blows the soils out. So I've seen recently some very, very dramatic pictures of Alcove House that indicate that probably we've lost, maybe several feet of soil toward the front of the alcove. So there is, even though that was an excavated site, we know for a fact that there is significant cultural resources still intact there. And so we are looking at ways that we can stabilize the site, stabilize the soil, harden maybe the top of it to make it a little bit more resilient for visitor use, and in a way that will protect the cultural resources that we know are still there. So phase one of that is a retaining wall and kiva stabilization, which is going to happen this summer. And down the road, like I said, we're looking at maybe some greater retaining walls. Hopefully, if we can fit that in a way that's culturally sensitive, but perhaps some backfill and some surface hardening that'll make that a more resilient site. We're also, it's a little early, but here's the scoop for you all. We were looking at potentially even stationing some employees up there to limit the amount of people that are there at one time. Generally, it's not the fact that people are visiting that is causing the erosion and the destabilization up there, but when large groups get up there, then it's hard. They don't stay in kind of the area we have cordoned off for and safe for visitor use. So there's just more impact. So in the short term, before we're able to make some of these more long-term improvements, in the short term, just to preserve what's still there, we're probably going to be limiting visitor access. So there may be, if you're planning for your planning purposes for the summer, you might have to wait for a while to get up there, because it just depending on the time of day you go and how many people are up there. Also, we're hoping that we can get a full-blown trail crew back this summer. Last summer, we just did not have any luck with our hiring, and we were not able to bring on the full trail crew. So we relied on some of our partners to do the trail work that we did. And we also have for those of you that remember way back, we had a series of bridges that went up between the main CCC area and Alcove House. And most of those were lost in the floods following the Las Conchas fire. So we actually have funding this year and a project in place to replace, I want to say, 5 bridges between the main parking area and Alcove House. So that should be coming in this summer as well. And of course, we have ongoing historic preservation. That's kind of our bread and butter. We're one of the leaders in the National Park Service in historic preservation. So that work is ongoing and continues. And also this summer, we're anticipating at least the first part of a project to rehabilitate the exterior of the fire tower. I think that's going to also begin in the spring of 2022. I'm going to say May because I'm done saying April, but I think we will see some work on the fire tower. And I see I'll share with you that my vision for the fire tower is, that it's not really we don't use them anymore in the way that they were designed when the CCC first put that thing together, as the picture here shows. But my hope is I would like to see that open for visitor use and as an interpretive site. So we're moving in that direction. And I think that to what I was saying earlier, we've been thinking internally that the fire tower would be an excellent place to talk about fire effects and the effects of climate change on the landscape. So I think that we'll be reaching out to some of our community partners to help us think that through and maybe do some initial interpretive planning with a goal down the road of making the fire tower a visitor contact space where we can interpret, climate change and fire effects. And once again, the trail work has continued. We had 2 crews from the Rocky Mountain Youth Corps that worked with us in 2021. We anticipate that's going to happen again in 2022. That's a phenomenal partnership and a phenomenal program that's getting area youth into the backcountry, connecting with the resource and restoring some of the trails that we lost after the floods and the fires of 10 years ago. We've also been some other resource highlights. I'll share with you that we've been trying in earnest to relocate or reintroduce the beaver population. We lost our entire population of beavers after the floods that followed Las Conchas. And we've been struggling to get them to reestablish. And we have a program in partnership with the New Mexico Fish and Wildlife Department, where we're taking some I don't want to call them nuisance, but say beavers doing what beavers do in areas where there's agriculture and irrigation, where maybe it's not so welcome. And so when the state removes some of these animals, we're bringing them into Bandelier. We're hiking them up into the still wet parts of Frijoles Canyon and releasing them and hoping that they'll reestablish. We've been doing quite a run on this thing. We haven't had a lot of success, but just last fall, almost with in coinciding with my arrival at Bandelier, we actually have 3 that appear to have survived. They've built a pond above the Alcove House junction. We believe that it appears, at least at first blush through this winter, it looks like they're doing well. So we may have had some success in reestablishing the beaver population in Frijoles Canyon. So I'm excited about that. And of course, ongoing work on studying the Jemez salamander and creating habitat for them. That's also ongoing. Another good partnership with the Fish and Wildlife and the USGS on that. And of course, we're continuing our very, very popular bird banding program. But that's something we've done in conjunction with Peak for several years. Great education opportunity. Very, very popular program with the area school children, and we're excited to believe we've secured funding for that now for the next 2 or 3 years. So I'm excited that program is going to continue. So that is pretty much my down and dirty about what's going on at Bandelier. I thank you all for your invite. I will pause here or turn it back over to Carol for if there's any questions. I'm happy to stick around and answer them. So thank you, Carol. I appreciate it.
And thank you. We have one question or comment. I guess that's a question. The beavers are doing very well, but will the trail to and from the upper crossing be rerouted around that pond?
Yes, we have actually already done a temporary one now, and it really depends on how big the pond gets. We feel like we have still quite a bit of latitude to do some rerouting just to kind of see how this goes. But we're not doing anything permanent yet, because obviously we don't know if they'll be permanent or not, but we're hoping. But yes, our trails foreman has been looking at that. We've got a temporary reroute. So currently, if you're going up to the upper crossing, you do not have to wade through the beaver pond. We've got that covered.
Or you're providing boots. Okay. And Barbara's asking, what is the status of the new trail from the visitor center to the Rio Grande?
Yeah, that is, currently the only way down to the Rio Grande and any kind of maintained trail is on the Burro Trail, and that is not an easy trail. So we definitely have projects in the work to see what we can do to repair that Lower Falls Trail down to the Rio Grande. It's definitely one of our goals, but it's a real engineering problem. It's kind of a bit of an attestament to the last one about why it fell apart, but it's either a real issue with bedrock and cultural sites, or it's building it through a scree slope. And both of those are kind of, they're really an engineering problem. So it has kind of elevated, it's still a priority for the park, but it's that kind of bumps us into the bigger project category, because there's going to be some substantial amount of engineering that can take place before we can figure out where that trail makes sense. So unfortunately, I don't have a date on when that's going to happen. I do think it's in our project request list for the coming year, but whether or not that gets picked up, that has yet to be seen.
Okay. So when will the visitor center, including the theater, be fully open?
Well, the visitor center and the museum are currently open, but we still have use limits in place. So we are following the cues from the CDC, because, you know, unfortunately, I think New Mexico, from the very beginning, New Mexico has been out ahead of the CDC, and rightfully so. They've had a much more aggressive and probably a little bit better science-based response. You know, the CDC is a big federal bureaucracy, and so it takes them a little while to turn. So, and since we're a federal entity, we have to follow the guidance that the CDC issues. So I think, you know, my guess is, and I'm prognosticating as if I'm, you know, the groundhog in Pennsylvania, but I think that it looks like that the state is going to start listing restrictions sometime in March, maybe. I'm guessing that the CDC is going to lag behind that, but everything I'm seeing in the media, and I'm probably seeing the same thing you are, is that the CDC is starting to turn toward relaxing restrictions. So once we have restrictions relaxed, then we can reopen the theater. I can tell you, in anticipation of that my chief of interpretation is working with the Friends of Bandelier and the WNPA to do a rehab of the infrastructure of the theater and the amphitheater in to upgrade all of our you know, visual facilities, change the projectors, change the audios, and just make it a little, the equipment we have up there is pretty old and not terribly functional. So I'm hoping that by the time that we're ready to reopen the theater to visitors, it'll be we're not changing the movie yet, because unfortunately the theater hasn't been running and I've never seen the movie. I hear it's good, but I'm taking my staff's word for that. And of course they're going to say it's good. So at this time, it's still going to be the same movie, but it should be a better experience when we do get it open.
Will they be able to upgrade the ventilation? I mean, we know that COVID's it's endemic now.
Yes.
So we don't want to limit people, but either or both. Either we have to increase the ventilation system or limit how many people can go in at one time. And when I've been there haven't been that many, so it's not been an issue, but I may have lucked out. So is there a way to do something with the ventilation system?
Well, we've done some high-end filtration and that kind of things in it already. But in terms of like really, when we have to follow the guidance from the CDC. So at some point we don't, other than the improvements that we've already made to increase airflow into some of those things that happened at the beginning of COVID, and that did happen with our air handler in the visitor center. But really in terms of limiting people in the theater, we have to go with what the CDC says. If they lift the limits, then we go back to full capacity, and then our visitors are just going to really have to find their own comfort level and visit it when they feel comfortable and not visit it when they don't feel comfortable.
Yeah. Okay, I have a lot of questions here. I better get going. So Kevin Stillman said he is leaving, and we want to know, have you found someone to replace him?
There should be an announcement hitting the street. I want to say probably within the next 2 to 3 weeks for a trails supervisor that will, it's not exactly Kevin Stillman's position, but it's kind of, it's a turn toward trying to professionalize the trails program a little and make it a little bit more solid. As it is now, I think I mentioned before, we've been really living on the Rocky Mountain Youth Corps and Kevin Stillman and our wilderness ranger and really a wonderful set of volunteers to do the trail openings and the spring openings. So we are moving toward a more permanent, more solid trail crew that'll give us more capacity in that arena. And so yes, it's not exactly Kevin's job that's going to hit the street soon, but a trails supervisor we'll be recruiting for a trails supervisor here probably within the next month.
Good. Next one, what are the plans or the future of the VCNP?
The VCNP? Somebody might need to clarify that for me. Is the Visitor Center NP?
Nina, you want to unmute?
That's the Valles Caldera National Park.
Oh, gotcha.
Thank you, Barbara. It's the Valles Caldera National Preserve.
Yes. So I know that they are about to, and they have some funding on it. They are about to embark on a general management plan, which is really one of the things that's been a real problem for the Valles Caldera for this whole time. And it's, really, it's no fault of Jorge or the people up there. It's just the Valles Caldera came into the national park system at a really kind of awkward time when the Park Service was getting away from general management plans and moving towards something we called foundation documents. So foundation documents really were a much, much shorter version of a general management plan that kind of solidifies what the interpretive themes were. It talked about our resources that were really critical to the foundation of the park. And it was this move to, consolidate all of these general management plans and various wilderness plans and everything into kind of a one concise document, which works great for parks that are very well established, like Bandelier or Independence. That's been fine. But for a park like the Valles Caldera that didn't have any of those pre-plans done, it turned out to kind of be a disaster. And I can say that was one of the things that's caused them to be kind of so far behind. And I know that the public is getting kind of impatient with them because they've had so many fits and starts, and it's still kind of not there yet. But I think just really within the last year, Jorge and the Valles staff have convinced the region planning office and the Washington planning people that they really need a general management plan. So that's been funded, and it's kicking off here, I want to say within the next few weeks. So that general management plan is going to give them, it really will solidify what zones there are in the parks. It'll figure out, it'll delineate what's going to be front country and what's going to be managed as front country and visitor use, what's going to be back country, what's going to be more primitive, how the grazing program is going to work, all of that stuff, which they really just don't have. So that's in progress. And I think there's an interim plan they're working for. There's a front country facilities plan that I think is in process as well, that's going to fix some of the really immediate things that are just these nuisance issues that have been plaguing them for a long time. Like for instance, the entrance station and the ability to get handicapped people into the back, just some of those infrastructure. So they're doing that as a separate planning effort in addition to the general management plan. So kind of both are going in tandem, but in short term, they're hoping to fix some of those nuisance issues that just kind of plague people that just want to have a casual visit, and also planning for the long term, so they can, they need this general management plan to get the money so they can get the projects, so they can do the infrastructure improvements, so they can build a visitor center, so they can think about a campground. All of that stuff has to follow that general management plan process.
In the 4 years that I have volunteered there, I've seen very little infrastructure improvement, etc. The trails were unmarked when I came, and they are still unmarked.
Yeah, that's a very fair comment. It is a very fair comment. It's very hard though to build trails if they don't have good archaeology surveys. It's even worse from a Park Service standpoint. And this is one of those things where the transition between being trust and the Park Service has been a rub for them, because the Park Service has standards and requirements about where a trail should go and why a trail would exist. And so they can't just, Jorge and the staff up there, they just can't go up there and start building and solidifying trails if they don't have a trails management plan to back that up. If they don't have a backcountry management plan that really has thought about in a really meaningful way about what these trails are going to be used for. So they can't just go out and take a social trail or a trail that was built before it came into the area and say, okay, we're going to just sanction this as a trail and then go to town on it. So I know that's not a satisfying answer, but that is what
It's not.
Thanks for trying, Nina.
Thank you very much, Superintendent, for answering my questions about the VCNP.
It's my pleasure. It's my pleasure. And I'm sorry I don't have a more satisfying answer for you.
Maybe this one's an easier one. I doubt it. But what is the
What is going to throw me? Well, you got to save a little bit up because you got the IT guy coming, right? Didn't I hear that, the IT guy?
Yeah, no, I'm not the nice person here. So what are the current plans to address the problem of feral cattle?
Well, I thought.
Yes. So are you talking feral cattle at the Valles or feral cattle in Bandelier?
Barbara, it's your question.
Or both?
In Bandelier.
So in Bandelier, we've done a lot of different things over the year to try and get at them, and unfortunately nothing has worked. So we haven't. The terrain is too horrible for herding them. So I guess just to be clear about it is we have some removal operations on the books, and those will be happening this winter when the visitation is very, very low. So to be blunt, we will remove them from the population, and then that's ongoing because you know, we can only remove the ones that are in the park that we can find. So whether that solves the problem, and I know we've done a lot of boundary fencing, you know, but the water gets low in the Rio Grande and they just walk across the river. So I think it's just something that we're going to have to contend with over time. But we're trying to manage it actively enough that they do minimal amounts of damage to the other resources around there.
So Patrick, what drives, this is multi-question, so let me go through them. And then we can go one at a time if you wish. What drives the capacity limits? Parking? How do you count people / cars / motorcycles? And is there a limited count in the museum? You want me to, I can do one at a time.
Yeah, I could back up. So what was the first part of that is how do we count visitation?
What drives the capacity limits? Question mark,
Right.
Parking, question mark? Or how do you count?
Currently, just to be
cars,
really, really
motorcycles?
blunt, is that yes, it is parking. Right now, we only have a limited number of parking spaces, and when they're full, we don't have any place else to put people. That's not the answer that we should have. We should have an answer that would say that X number of people visiting, you know, these cave-8s have this amount of capacity. So, but we don't have that science yet. That's something that's on our radar. We need to, as we start figuring out how we're going to manage these spikes in visitation. You know, there is some studies out there, and matter of fact, they were doing some when I was in Joshua Tree that talked about, you know, what density of people can go out onto a trail before the trail starts deforesting, or before the ground cover starts going away, or how many people can get on a trail system before people start walking 4 abreast and the trail starts widening into cultural sites. So it's possible to get that kind of information, but we don't have it yet. So when we're looking down the road at how we're going to manage some of these spikes in visitation, we are going to need to think about how we're going to get the right amount of social science to really let us know, because really at the end of the day, it's the parking lot is one thing, and we really can't expand the parking lot because, you know, the footprint, all of Bandelier is a critical cultural site. So there's just no place to do that without impacting parking. So the shuttle gives us, you know, a little, that gives us kind of a buffer over, that takes the parking lot out of the equation if we're using the shuttle, but it doesn't solve the problem of how many people can be, you know, on the Pueblo Loop Trail and entering the cave-8s without there being damage to them, or how many people can be in Alcove House at one time before the resource is being degraded. So it's a kind of a two-parter, is that yes, right now the driver is the parking lot. Down the road, I'd like the driver to be more, what does the social science tell us about impacts to the resources? Because that's in the end of the day, that's why we're here. So what was the next part of the question?
Is there a limited count in the museum?
Currently there is, but that's COVID restriction based. And when the COVID restrictions go away, then it goes to the fire marshal. So
Karen, did he answer all that you wanted? Okay. Next question. Will Bandelier do evening bat walks with rangers this summer? I really enjoyed taking my daughter to that program a few years ago.
well, that's great to hear. I'd love to hear that. I mentioned earlier that, well, maybe I didn't go into it in depth, but I did say it with the trail crew, but we really have a hard time with our recruitment in Bandelier. Our park housing rates are based on the community. We're required by law to do a community survey, and we set the rates for even the park housing that we own based on what the surrounding community is. And I can tell you, as somebody who just tried to buy a house in the Los Alamos area, what a nightmare. I mean, what a nightmare. So, I mean, and I wasn't even trying to rent, but I can tell you that the experience I had trying to buy a house in Los Alamos was nothing short of traumatic. So now we have, the people that help us do our interpretive programs. Well, even if we have a slot for them in park housing, that park housing rent is based on rents in Los Alamos. So we're having a hard time, competing with other parks because, these people, the pay is the same, but they have to pay more percentage of their income toward housing if they come to Bandelier. So not to dismiss away the bat talk. I love the staff I have right now in interpretation. They are so excited to do those things, but we also have to cover the basic services. I mean, we can't close the visitor center. I don't have unlimited overtime to pay them when the visitor center is closed. So we have capacity limits. Last summer, we did some night sky programs in the amphitheater that I attended, and I thought they were phenomenal. So there's a real strong drive to bring those kind of programs back, but we have a capacity problem. So I will take your comment. I appreciate that comment. I love to hear that. I've heard that back one was a phenomenal program, and I'd love to see that come back. And I'll take that feedback back to the chief of interpretation as well. But I think we will rebuild that level of capacity. But I don't know. I wish I could say that they'd be back this summer, but I don't know that they will.
Okay, so I have one more question and then a really good one. One that you have to think about. One's pretty
Fantastic.
What was the outcome of the Valles Caldera management zoning planning from last April?
Oh, unfortunately, I wish I had that answer, but I don't. So I'm sorry to shine that off. But I know that the previous planning documents, and there was a lot of them that came. So some of them were done with the trust, and I think that there's some misunderstandings out in the community about which documents and which conclusions that the trust came to that would roll over to the Park Service. And the unfortunate answer is none of them. So, the park, the Valles can use those previous planning documents to inform future planning, but they're not bound by them. So the zone planning document, and I have seen that zone map. I think that's out there in the world as a potentially an alternate or as one of the solutions that might make it into the general management plan. But whether it does or not, I don't know. That I think it's too early in the process to say that. But that's where that is. It's those previous planning documents can help inform future planning efforts, but they don't have to.
And this, before I ask that very simple question, Barbara, are you here? There, up there.
Sorry.
So didn't you ask?
This is a follow-up on that, the Valles Caldera. So I participated in that planning. And it was in 2021. Nothing, the management has not changed since then. And it seemed to address some of the issues that you talked about for the future planning, which you said was going to start soon for the Valles Caldera. And they were talking, so it was a sort of general issue about the backcountry and the front country and where to put campground and where to admit cars and so forth. And I haven't heard any follow-up since then. I would really appreciate it if at least the people who participated could be told what happened.
I duly noted, and I wish I had that answer for you right here. Like I said, I know I've seen those zoning maps, but particularly when it comes to like some of the zoning that I saw related to potential campground placement and entrance roads and car access, those are still there, and I think that those are still Jorge's. I think that's how he landed on his preferred alternatives. But in order to make those happen, then there's got to be funds that come in to build roads and to move power lines and to deal with that kind of infrastructure to implement that part of the plan. And that can't happen until he does this interim front country zoning plan. I don't think it's going to address all those things. I think that wider general management plan has to be in place before he can attract the project money to make all those other projects come true. So I know that's a frustratingly slow process. I would say thank you for participating in that process. I do think it's going to help. I think that process that you participated in is likely where the preferred alternatives came up for that are going to likely make it into the general management plan.
Thank you.
And Barbara, I wanted to ask you something, which was when we were talking about having Patrick come speak with us, didn't you mention something about helicopters or something going around the park? Do you remember this?
Yeah, so Bandelier and other parks are trying to establish rules for the air tours.
Yes. So yeah, we are in the process. I believe there were 30 some odd parks. And to back it up a little bit further is I believe a few years ago, the FAA had they had a posture that said that only certain parks needed to have air tour management. I think that the National Park Association sued the FAA and they won. And so the FAA had to go back and visit every park that had air tours and that didn't have an air tour management plan that hit a certain threshold. And Bandelier was one of, I want to say 32 parks or something. That's probably the wrong number, but I'm just using that as an estimation that fell into that category. So the FAA started down that process, I want to say in earnest last summer. The first public meeting for that landed right, I mean, literally within my first week of on the job. And without, stupidly, I attend that meeting and do the welcome and everything. And then I find out very rapidly from the tribal participants that were on there that consultation really hadn't happened and that it wasn't substantive. And I can say that, and I appreciate this of the tribes, they let me know that was an issue. So we backed off a bit, and I think the FAA had to revisit it. I can tell you the FAA is the lead agency on that. It's a joint effort between the National Park Service and the FAA, but the FAA has the lead because they actually ultimately have the jurisdiction. So unfortunately that is where that lands. So we are in earnest now consulting with the tribes. So we've kicked that up in earnest, and I think that they've done a consultation meeting with Santa Clara so far. I believe we have one on the books for Tsuki and then for Cochiti, but that is where that is. And I think the tribes, I can tell you from my perspective, the tribes have made it very, very clear that they do not want this activity happening over Bandelier. So, and I am certainly committed to backing up my tribal partners.
Thank you.
Barbara, your hand is up. Do you have another question?
No, sorry.
Okay, so I'll end this in one is a very sincere thank you that this person needed to leave. And she said, it's really interesting to hear about upcoming plans for Bandelier. And we're lucky to have such a beautiful park on our doorsteps. And the very last question, which is really going to make you happy, is how's the best way to donate money?
Our primary philanthropic partner is the Friends of Bandelier. So that's obviously the best way. So I would suggest, reach out to the Friends of Bandelier. And I think that matter of fact, we just gave them a laundry list of things that we could use support on. And I think that they would be overjoyed to get that donation. And those donations do come right back to the park to help us with very tangible things for visitor support and visitor use.
Is there anyone else who has anything? I had just one comment, which is probably impossible, but I'll say it anyway. So when I was teaching at the middle school, Craig Martin used to take all of the 8th grade teams different days. So that's about 100 kids. And they did work in different places. And I'm wondering if it's possible or not. I don't know. And I don't know who would do it. So all those things. But they've definitely stopped doing that. And I'm wondering, 100 kids, it's like they're little beavers going through and it's amazing what they can do. And I wondered, because it is difficult to hire people and that's free labor, except that, we have to get the buses and do all that stuff. But if it's possible to think about or coordinate something, you would have to talk to Suzanne Lynn, who's the principal of the middle school. But anyway, it was just an idea. If there are things that are not dangerous, of course, but they had all that equipment. Well, the dangerous equipment the girls had and the boys had the shovels, but okay.
We love volunteer parties, and then I can tell you we've had some discussions with the Rotary Club about potential volunteers through them as well. So I think there might be some synergy there. But yes, I'd love to see that happen again.
So I'm going to thank you, unless anyone else has a comment. Nina has a comment over here.
Of course. Superintendent, I would be most pleased if you would also mention, when you mention Friends of Bandelier, Los Amigos de Valles Caldera National Preserve.
Thank you. That's a good, I apologize for the omission, but thank you for that. Yes, another wonderful organization supporting the Valles Caldera.
Okay, well, we thank everyone for coming. And we've certainly enjoyed, Patrick, and the ins and outs, and getting our schedules together. It worked out to be perfect in the end, and I thank you very much.
Well, thank you. Thank you for the invitation. It was lovely to see you all.
And